The notification ping on my phone should have been routine. Just another message from Julia while I wrapped up another late night at the office, debugging security protocols for yet another client who thought password 123 was adequate protection. My name's Nate Foster, and I've spent the last 15 years making sure other people's digital lives don't fall apart. Ironic considering what was about to happen to mine. I glanced at my phone, expecting maybe a grocery list or a reminder about Emma's soccer practice. Instead, I saw a video file with a timestamp from 20 minutes ago. The preview thumbnail made my stomach drop. My wife Julia, 35 and still stunning in that polished way that turns heads at corporate events, was in our master bathroom. But this wasn't some innocent selfie or accidental recording. The angle, the lighting, the deliberate positioning, this was meant for someone. And based on the message thread, that someone wasn't me. Hope this holds you over until tomorrow night. Can't wait to feel you again. Jay. The message was sent to a contact labeled M Work Project. I knew exactly who M was. Mason Grant, her biggest corporate client, the guy she'd been working late nights with for the past 3 months. The same Mason who drove a vintage Mustang and wore suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I sat back in my desk chair, the glow from my dual monitors casting everything in an eerie blue light. My first instinct wasn't rage. It was that weird, detached clarity that kicks in during a crisis. The same mental state that got me through 2 tours overseas before I transitioned into civilian IT work. Julia had meant to send this to Mason. Instead, she'd sent it to her husband of 12 years. The woman who lectured Emma about being careful with social media had just made the kind of mistake that destroys marriages. I forwarded the video to my personal cloud storage, then screenshotted the message thread. Old habits from my military days. Document everything, assume nothing, prepare for the worst case scenario. My phone buzzed. Julia again. Working late again tonight? Don't wait up. Love you. The casual lie hit harder than the video. This wasn't some momentary lapse in judgment. This was calculated deception, delivered with the same tone she used to ask me to pick up milk on the way home. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the parking garage. Time to pay a visit to my neighbor Ty Harris, the only person I trusted enough for what I was about to do. Ty lived 3 houses down from us in our suburban Portland neighborhood. Ex-cop turned gym owner, the kind of guy who'd help you move a couch or hide a body with equal enthusiasm. Not that I was planning anything that extreme, but Ty understood loyalty in a way most people didn't. I found him in his garage, working on his motorcycle with some old punk rock album, providing the soundtrack. He looked up when I knocked on the open door, took one look at my face, and turned off the music. "What happened?" he asked, wiping grease off his hands with a shop rag. I handed him my phone without saying a word. Watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding to something approaching righteous anger. "Well, that's not what I expected to see tonight," he said, handing the phone back. "What's your play?" "Both cars are in my driveway right now. Julia's Honda and a vintage Mustang that doesn't belong to either of us." Ty nodded slowly. "You want backup?" "I want a witness, and maybe someone to keep me from doing something I'll regret later. Give me 2 minutes to grab some zip ties and my camera." "Zip ties? Trust me, you'll want options." The drive back to my house took exactly 4 minutes, long enough for me to run through a dozen different scenarios, none of which ended with a rational conversation about marriage counseling. Julia had made her choice. Now I got to make mine. My house looked exactly the same as when I'd left that morning. Same carefully maintained lawn, same decorative shutters Julia had insisted on, same welcome mat that now felt like a sick joke. The only difference was Mason's car, parked behind Julia's in the driveway, bold as brass. "How do you want to do this?" Ty asked as we sat in his truck, engine running. "Front door. No sneaking around, no dramatic reveals. Just walk in like I live there." "Because you do live there." "Exactly." I used my key, opened the door normally, and called out like I always did when coming home late. "Julia, I'm home. Finished up early tonight." The scrambling sounds from upstairs were immediate and frantic. Footsteps, muffled voices, what sounded like someone trying to get dressed in a hurry. Ty stepped in behind me, camera ready, but discreet. We waited in the living room, surrounded by the family photos and wedding pictures that now felt like evidence of a crime scene. Julia appeared at the top of the stairs first, wrapped in her robe, hair disheveled, trying to look casual and failing completely. Nate, you scared me. I thought you were working late. Change of plans. Is everything okay up there? I heard voices. Mason appeared behind her, fully dressed but with his shirt buttoned wrong and his hair sticking up in directions that suggested recent activity. Mason was just helping me with some event planning, Julia said. The lie so transparent it was almost insulting. In the bedroom? I asked. That's dedication to client service. The silence stretched out like a rubber band about to snap. Mason looked like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. Julia's face cycled through several expressions before settling on defiance. It's not what you think, she said. I pulled out my phone and held it up so she could see the screen. Her video paused at a particularly revealing moment. Actually, I think it's exactly what I think. You sent this to me by mistake about an hour ago. Wrong contact, right message. Julia's face went pale. Mason took a step backward, probably calculating the distance to the nearest exit. Ty, I said without taking my eyes off my wife, would you mind helping Mason to the backyard? I think he needs some fresh air. My pleasure. What happened next wasn't violence exactly, more like aggressive landscaping. Ty, with his police training and gym owner strength, convinced Mason that cooperation was his best option. The zip ties came in handy for securing Mason to our patio furniture while we sorted things out. Julia tried to explain, then argue, then threaten. I listened with the same detached interest I'd give to a software manual. When she finished, I had only one thing to say. Your turn to feel powerless. And don't bother trying to delete anything. I already saved everything to 3 different cloud accounts. I looked out at Mason, zip-tied to a patio chair in his expensive suit, and felt something that might have been satisfaction. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up in Ty's guest room, with the kind of clarity that comes after a sleepless night of planning. Julia had spent the evening alternating between tears and threats, while Mason had eventually been released with a warning that any attempt at retaliation would result in his wife Allison receiving some very interesting videos. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Julia and 43 text messages ranging from apologetic to furious to desperate. I deleted them without reading most of them. Coffee's ready, Ty called from the kitchen, and you've got a visitor. I found Ty's girlfriend Lena at the kitchen table, her laptop open and a legal pad covered in notes. Lena worked as a paralegal downtown and had the kind of practical knowledge about divorce law that you couldn't get from Google. Ty filled me in, she said without preamble. We need to talk strategy before Julia gets her act together and hires representation. I'm not sure I'm ready for lawyers yet. You don't have a choice. She's going to play the victim card, claim emotional distress, maybe even try to flip the script and make you look like the aggressor. We need to get ahead of this. Lena was right, of course. Julia was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. She'd spent 12 years learning how I thought, how I reacted, what buttons to push. But she'd also just handed me the kind of evidence that divorce attorneys dream about. What's your recommendation? Document everything. Secure your assets. File first and file with prejudice. And whatever you're planning for revenge, and don't tell me you're not planning something, keep it legal and keep it public. Public? Shame is more powerful than anger. Julia's whole identity is built around her professional reputation and social status. Take those away and you've won without throwing a punch. I spent the morning following Lena's advice, transferred funds from our joint accounts to my personal account, legally since I was the primary earner, changed passwords on all our shared digital accounts, downloaded 12 years of email history, text messages, and financial records. By lunchtime, I had enough evidence to bury Julia in any divorce proceeding. But that wasn't enough. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about consequences. My first stop was Julia's office. She worked for an event planning company that specialized in corporate retreats and family-friendly community events. Their whole brand was built around wholesome values and trustworthy service. Julia was their star employee, the one they put on brochures and sent to pitch new clients. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in the parking lot and composed an anonymous email to the company's HR department. The subject line was simple: concerning employee conduct, Julia Foster. The email included carefully edited screenshots of Julia's messages to Mason, along with a professional summary of her affair and the potential liability it created for the company. No explicit images, nothing that could be considered harassment, just the facts presented in the kind of corporate language that HR departments understand. I sent similar emails to Mason's company, focusing on his misuse of corporate resources and potential conflicts of interest. Again, nothing illegal, just the kind of ethical violations that make corporate lawyers nervous. My phone rang as I was pulling out of the parking lot. Julia, of course. "What did you do?" she demanded without saying hello. "I'm not sure what you mean." "My boss just called me into his office. Someone sent HR information about us, about Mason and me. That's unfortunate. Identity theft is a real problem these days." "This isn't funny, Nate. I could lose my job." "That's a possibility. Actions have consequences, Julia. I thought you understood that. We need to talk, face to face. There are things you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You've been having an affair for months. You've been lying to me daily, and you accidentally sent me a video that was meant for your lover. What else is there to understand?" The silence stretched out for nearly 30 seconds. When Julia spoke again, her voice had changed. Less desperate, more calculating. "If you think you can destroy my life without consequences, you're wrong. I know things about you too, Nate. Things that Emma wouldn't want to hear about her father." The threat was vague but clear. Julia was shifting into survival mode, which meant she was about to get dangerous. "Looking forward to it," I said and hung up. My next stop was the neighborhood. Julia's social life revolved around our subdivision's informal network of stay-at-home parents and young professionals. The same people who attended block parties and organized charity drives were also the most efficient gossip network in Portland. I didn't have to do much. Mrs. Klein, our neighbor 2 houses down, had apparently witnessed Mason's zip-tie adventure from her kitchen window. By the time I got home, there were already 3 neighbors in my yard, asking if everything was okay. "Just some marriage troubles," I told them, which was technically true. "Julia's been working late a lot lately. Turns out she's been working closer with her clients than I realized." I let them draw their own conclusions. In a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business, conclusions spread faster than wildfire. My phone buzzed with a text from Ty. "Mason's at the gym. Thought you should know." I drove to Ty's place, a converted warehouse that served as both his business and his personal training space. I found Mason on a treadmill, trying to work off stress and probably hoping the exercise would help him think of a way out of his situation. He saw me coming and stopped the machine, grabbing a towel and trying to look casual. It didn't work. "We need to talk," he said. "I'm listening. This thing with Julia, it's not what you think. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" "You're both married to other people, you've been having an affair for months, and you're both lying to everyone about it. Seems pretty straightforward to me." Mason glanced around the gym, probably looking for support that wasn't coming. Ty was spotting someone on the bench press, but I could tell he was listening to every word. "Look, I know you're angry. I get it. But destroying both our lives isn't going to fix anything." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." "My wife doesn't deserve this. She's innocent." "So was I until yesterday. Funny how that works." Mason's face flushed red. He was used to being the guy in control, the one with money and influence. Having his life turned upside down by an IT consultant wasn't fitting his self-image. "You want to play hardball? Fine. But remember, Julia knows things about you that could make your life very difficult. Such as, ask her yourself." He headed for the locker room, probably planning to shower and then coordinate with Julia on their next move. I followed him, not because I was worried about his threats, but because I had one more point to make. "Mason," I called out as he reached his locker. "One more thing." He turned around, and I took a picture with my phone. Him, sweaty and disheveled in a public gym, looking guilty and desperate. Smile for social media. The flash seemed to blind him for a second. By the time he recovered, I was already walking away. "This isn't over," he called after me. "You're absolutely right," I replied without turning around. "It's just getting started." Julia's lawyer was everything I expected. Sharp, expensive, and completely without moral qualms. Ms. Ortega met me at a downtown coffee shop the next afternoon, her briefcase probably worth more than my car, and her smile colder than Portland rain. Mr. Foster, I represent your wife in what I hope will be an amicable dissolution of your marriage. Amicable, I repeated, stirring my coffee. Interesting choice of words. Julia has made mistakes. She acknowledges that. But she's prepared to be reasonable if you're willing to do the same. Define reasonable. Ms. Ortega opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Joint custody of Emma, with Julia retaining primary residence. You keep your retirement accounts, she keeps the house. Community property split down the middle, and both parties agree not to disparage each other publicly or professionally. And if I don't agree to these terms, then things become more complicated. Julia has evidence that you've been engaging in harassment, stalking, and potentially criminal behavior, anonymous emails to employers, public humiliation, intimidation tactics. A judge might find your behavior concerning, especially when determining custody arrangements. I had to admire the strategy. Julia was trying to flip the script, make me the villain in a story where she was caught cheating. It was clever, but it had one major flaw. I'd been documenting everything. That's an interesting theory, I said, but I think you're missing some key evidence. I pulled out my own folder, considerably thicker than hers. 12 years of financial records showing that Julia spent our money on hotels, restaurants, and gifts for her lover. Phone records showing hundreds of calls and messages to Mason during work hours. Security footage from her office building showing them entering and leaving together. And of course, the video she sent me by mistake. Ms. Ortega's expression didn't change, but I saw her fingers tighten on her pen. More importantly, I continued, I have evidence that Julia and Mason have been coordinating their stories, trying to cover up their affair, and now attempting to blackmail me into accepting an unfavorable divorce settlement. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation. Your client made a choice to have an affair. Now she's trying to avoid the consequences by threatening me and manipulating the legal system. That's not going to work. I stood up, leaving my folder on the table. Tell Julia she has 24 hours to come clean to Emma about why our marriage is ending. If she doesn't, I will. And I'll be a lot less diplomatic about it. Ms. Ortega's composure finally cracked slightly. Mr. Foster, you're making a mistake. Julia has resources you don't. Connections, influence, financial backing. This doesn't have to be a war, but if you insist on making it one, you might not like how it ends. We'll see. I left the coffee shop feeling oddly energized. Julia was escalating, which meant she was getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, and I was counting on her making a big one. My phone rang as I reached my car. Ty, we've got a problem, he said. Someone broke into your house. I drove home with my heart hammering, expecting to find windows smashed and belongings scattered. Instead, I found something more subtle and more disturbing. The house looked normal from the outside, but the front door lock had been picked professionally. Ty met me on the front porch, his expression grim. Nothing's missing, he said, but someone went through everything, your office especially. They were looking for something specific. We walked through the house together. Whoever had done this was good. Drawers had been opened and closed, papers had been moved and replaced, electronics had been handled and repositioned. But everything was almost exactly where it should be. Professional job, Ty observed. Not random burglary. Someone with training. I checked my office first. My computers were still there, but I could tell they'd been accessed. File cabinets had been searched. Even my old military gear had been examined. What were they looking for, Ty asked. Evidence. Something they could use against me in court or in public. I sat down at my desk and started checking my digital security. Julia's playing for keeps now. My security cameras had been disabled, but not before recording the break-in. The footage showed a man in dark clothes and a baseball cap, someone who knew exactly what he was doing. He'd been in the house for less than 20 minutes, but he'd covered every room systematically. You recognize him? Ty asked, looking at the footage. No, but I bet Julia does. I called the police, filed a report, and handed over the security footage. Then I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed. But the real damage wasn't to my house. It was to my sense of security. Julia had crossed a line, and there was no going back. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Back off or things get worse. I showed the message to Ty. He shook his head. They're trying to intimidate you. Classic escalation pattern. It's not going to work. I know, but they don't know that yet. Which means they're going to keep pushing until something breaks. Then we better make sure it's not us. That evening, I picked up Emma from her after-school program. At 12, she was old enough to sense that something was wrong, but young enough to hope that adult problems would somehow resolve themselves without affecting her world. Dad, why are you picking me up instead of Mom? Your mom's busy with work. I thought we could grab dinner, just the two of us. Is everything okay? Mom's been acting weird lately. I looked at my daughter in the rearview mirror, trying to figure out how much truth a 12-year-old could handle. She had Julia's eyes, but my stubborn streak. And she deserved honesty, even if it hurt. Your mom and I are having some problems, Em. Adult problems. But whatever happens between us, it doesn't change how much we both love you. Are you getting divorced? The question hit me like a punch to the chest. Kids always cut straight to the heart of things. Probably. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know that's not what you wanted to hear. Emma was quiet for several blocks. When she finally spoke, her voice was small but steady. Is it because of that man who comes to the house sometimes? The one with the fancy car? My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What man? Mom told me he was a work friend. But they act weird around each other. And he looks at her funny. So Emma had figured it out on her own, or at least part of it. Kids notice more than adults give them credit for. Yes, I said, it's because of him. I don't like him. He pretends to be nice, but he's not really. You're a smart kid, Em. Smarter than your old man sometimes. We had dinner at her favorite restaurant, talking about school and soccer and anything except the fact that her family was falling apart. But I could see the worry in her eyes, the way she kept glancing at her phone, probably hoping for a text from Julia that would somehow make everything normal again. When I dropped her off at home, Julia was waiting in the living room. She looked like she hadn't slept, and her usually perfect appearance was showing cracks. We need to talk, she said. Emma, go upstairs and start your homework. Your mom and I need to discuss some things. Once Emma was out of earshot, Julia's mask slipped completely. Someone broke into your house today, she said. I noticed. Any idea who might have done that? It wasn't me, but you know who it was. Julia's silence was answer enough. This is getting out of hand, Nate. People are going to get hurt. People are already hurt. Our daughter knows about Mason. She's 12 years old, and she's figured out that her mother is having an affair. Julia's face went pale. What did you tell her? The truth. That her parents are getting divorced because one of them decided to have an affair with a married man. You had no right to. I had every right. She's my daughter, too, and she deserves to know why her world is falling apart. Julia stood up, her hands shaking. This isn't over, Nate. You think you're winning, but you have no idea what you're up against. Then show me. She walked to the door, then turned back. Mason has connections you can't imagine. People who can make your life very difficult. Your job, your reputation, your future. All of it can disappear. Let them try. After Julia left, I sat in the living room surrounded by the remnants of our life together. Wedding photos, family vacations, 12 years of shared memories that now felt like lies. But I wasn't backing down. Julia and Mason had escalated this conflict, and now they were going to learn what happened when you picked a fight with someone who had nothing left to lose. Mason's connections revealed themselves 3 days later when I arrived at work to find my boss waiting in my office with a concerned expression and a manila folder. Nate, we need to talk, Dave said, closing the door behind him. I got some disturbing information about you yesterday. What kind of information? Dave opened the folder and pulled out printed copies of emails, text messages, and what looked like surveillance photos. All of them showed me in various locations around the city, but the context had been manipulated to make my activities look suspicious or threatening. Someone's claiming you've been stalking and harassing a client's wife. They say you've been following her, taking pictures, sending threatening messages. I looked through the documents, recognizing my own activities, but seeing them twisted into something sinister. My visit to Julia's office became workplace harassment. My conversation with Mason at the gym became intimidation and threats. Even my meeting with Ms. Ortega had been spun as erratic and potentially dangerous behavior. This is all fabricated, I said. Someone's trying to frame me. I hope so. But I have to take these allegations seriously. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. Dave, you've known me for 8 years. Do you really think I'm capable of this? Honestly, no. But I can't ignore evidence, even if it doesn't feel right. Take some time off, get your personal situation sorted out, and we'll figure this out when things calm down. I cleaned out my desk under Dave's watchful eye, feeling like a criminal in my own workplace. But as I packed my belongings, I was also thinking, the evidence against me was too perfect, too comprehensive. Someone had been planning this for weeks, documenting my every move and building a case designed to destroy my professional reputation. The problem was, I'd been documenting their activities too. I drove straight to Ty's gym, where I found him training a client on the heavy bag. He took one look at my face and called a break. They got you fired? Suspended. But it's the same thing. I showed him the folder Dave had given me. Someone's been following me, taking pictures, building a harassment case. Ty flipped through the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. This is professional work. Private investigator, maybe ex-law enforcement. Someone with resources and connections. Mason's connections. Probably, but they made a mistake. What mistake? Ty pointed to one of the surveillance photos, a shot of me leaving the coffee shop after meeting with Ms. Ortega. Look at the timestamp. This photo was taken before you even knew about the affair. They've been watching you since before Julia sent that video. The implications hit me like a freight train. This wasn't an accident. Julia didn't send me that video by mistake. Think about it. Julia's having an affair, but she's also building a case against you. The video, the lawyer meeting, the break-in, the harassment allegations. It's all connected. She wanted me to find out about the affair. But why? I thought about it, running through the timeline in my head. Julia's behavior over the past few months, the late nights, the distance, the way she'd been encouraging me to work longer hours and spend more time away from home. She's been planning to leave me, but she needed a reason that would look good in court, a reason that would get her custody, the house, maybe even alimony. So she sets up the affair to look accidental, then documents your reaction to prove you're unstable and dangerous. Except she didn't count on me being smarter than she thought. Ty grinned. Time to spring your own trap? Pastime. I spent the rest of the day at Ty's place, using his computer and internet connection to put together my own case. Every email, every text message, every piece of evidence I'd been collecting for the past week. But more importantly, I started digging into the timeline of Julia's affair and the surveillance operation against me. What I found was even worse than I'd suspected. Julia and Mason hadn't just been having an affair. They'd been planning to destroy my life from the beginning. Bank records showed payments to a private investigation firm, starting 3 months ago. Email metadata revealed that Julia had been coordinating with Mason and his corporate lawyers to build a harassment case against me. The video she'd sent me wasn't a mistake. It was bait, designed to provoke exactly the kind of reaction that would support their narrative of an unstable, vengeful husband. But they'd underestimated me in one crucial way. They assumed I'd react emotionally, lash out without thinking, give them the evidence they needed. Instead, I'd been methodical, careful, and thorough. Now it was time to use their own strategy against them. I started with Mason's wife, Allison. She deserved to know what her husband had been doing. And more importantly, she deserved to know that he'd been using their shared resources to fund his affair and his campaign against me. The meeting took place at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant downtown, where Allison and I could talk without interruption. She was an elegant woman in her late 30s, with the kind of understated confidence that comes from genuine accomplishment rather than inherited wealth. Thank you for meeting with me, I said as we sat down. I know this is awkward. When someone calls and says they have information about my husband's affair, awkward is the least of my concerns. I laid out everything I'd discovered piece by piece. The affair itself, the surveillance operation, the coordinated legal strategy, the financial records showing how Mason had used their joint accounts to fund his activities. Allison listened without interruption, her expression growing colder with each revelation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "About a week, but they've been planning this for months." "And you're telling me because?" "Because you deserve to know the truth, and because Mason's been using your money to destroy my life." Allison nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. Your husband and my wife have been playing a game with other people's lives. It's time someone changed the rules. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give them exactly what they want. A public confrontation, documented evidence of my unstable behavior, and a chance to play the victim." "That sounds like you're walking into their trap." "Sometimes the best way to avoid a trap is to spring it yourself, on your own terms." I left the restaurant feeling better than I had in days. Allison was smart, angry, and motivated. She'd file for divorce within the week, and her lawyers would tear apart Mason's finances and expose his affair in court. But that was just the opening move. The real game was about to begin. The neighborhood block party was Julia's idea, though she didn't know it yet. Every year, our subdivision organized a community gathering in the park.